Welcome back, everybody, to our final panel of the day. I hope everybody is well rested and got some excellent networking done. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you to introduce the next amazing panel, which is Language Rich and Joyful Learning, Supporting Pandemic Recovery for English Learners and Dual Language Learners. We have a fantastic panel ready for you. But first and foremost, I would like to introduce the incredible Dr. Barbara Flores. She is a past CLSBA president, as well as president for CABE, and an amazing and dear friend to many across the state and to the Latino community. So welcome, Barbara. We are really happy to have you here and for you to be the MC for the panel.
Yes, thank you, Jorge. I appreciate your kudos. My name is Dr. Barbara Flores, and not only am I CABE president and past president of CLSBA, but I'm also a school board member and been a school board member for San Bernardino City Unified School District since 2008. And I also was just recently appointed by the state superintendent of California, Tony Thurman, to be co-chair of the statewide literacy by literacy campaign, which is a great honor. And I think it's just fabulous that we're doing that. And I am so happy to be here with all of you and this exceptional panel of experts for this very important discussion today. Our panelists are going to address a plethora of topics, challenges, silver linings, research findings, and instructional practices that deal with our English language learners, our dual language learners, our immigrant children, our children living in low-income households, and the impact it has on their families. Our distinguished panelists' expertise will be definitely enlightening, but also they will be provocative and also very healing. So I am so honored to moderate this panel of incredible experts. I sincerely say that, and I think you will all just be enthralled and love everything that they're going to share with us today, their wisdom, their expertise, and their loving and caring ways. So the first panelist will be Dr. Hurwitz. Would you please go ahead and start and just introduce yourself, your title, the name of your organization, and just a couple of sentences that you want to share with us. And then we'll go down the line. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Anya Hurwitz, and I'm the Executive Director of SEAL, Sobrato Early Academic Language. It is my great honor to be here with you today. SEAL is a nonprofit organization dedicated to centralizing the needs of English learners and dual language learners in California. We equip educators and school communities with effective research-based strategies, tools, and professional learning. Our goal is to combat educational inequity by working to provide English learners and dual language learners with asset-based, culturally and linguistically relevant and affirming educational systems so they can learn, thrive, and lead. So glad to be here today.
Thank you. And next will be, I believe, Martha Hernandez.
So I'm Martha Hernandez. I'm the Executive Director of Californians Together, and we are an advocacy coalition that comes together to promote equitable English learner education policy and practice. And we advocate for a system that is funded and structured so that every student has full access to a high-quality 21st century education with opportunities to develop proficiency in multiple languages. And it is an honor to be here.
Thank you, Martha. Jan, would you be next, please?
Hi, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Thank you, Barbara. My name is Jan Gustafson Correa, and I echo the words of my colleagues. It is such an honor to be here with you today. I'm the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of CABE, the California Association for Bilingual Education. As you heard, Dr. Barbara Flores is the president of our board of directors currently. And CABE, as you may know, is a nonprofit educational organization that is getting ready to celebrate its 47th year of existence. We were initiated in 1975, always with the vision towards biliteracy and bilingualism, multicultural competency, and educational equity for all. CABE, has really branched itself out to really address the different needs of our educational community. You may have attended one of our conferences in these past 47 or so years. Our annual conference and regional conferences have been a mainstay of the organization. But I'm really excited to share, too, that CABE has a really rigorous and, I think, impactful program to address the needs of parents and families through different modules and trainings and resources that we provide parents and families, working directly with schools and districts. And we have a very strong professional learning branch where we work to support schools and districts, not just at the conferences, but actually directly in your schools and districts as well. We also are one of the awardees of the state EWI grant, Education Workforce Investment Grant. Our grant is called Multilingual California, and our partners at Californians Together have one as well called EL Rise. So we have been really closely embedded and integrated into the advocacy and celebration of celebrating the language and cultural assets and needs of our English learner students in California. Great to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Jan. And lastly, Junhee, would you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junhee Do, and I'm a senior policy and research analyst on the educational equity team at Advancement Project California. We are a racial justice civil rights organization with over 20 years of expertise in policy research and advocacy, and we work to transform public systems and shift investments to create a more racially equitable California. My work specifically on the team has focused on advocating for policies, programs, and resources investments that ensure our dual language learners from birth to 5 and beyond, and children of color from low-income communities are equitably supported and fully embraced for the cultural and linguistic assets and strengths they bring to the public education system. I'm excited to be here today among these strong women and to discuss more how we can support collectively our little ones and those in the K-12 system as we recover from the pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move now. You are such a powerhouse. I'm so honored to be here with you. Our first question will be for everyone. We know that English learners, dual language learners, children from immigrant families, and children living in low-income households are among those who have been hardest hit by the health and economic consequences of the pandemic. What were the challenges, and what did we learn from having to make that pivot? I'll say it again. What were the challenges, and what did we learn from having to make that pivot? And I will start with Martha as our first respondent. Your mic is on mute, Martha.
Thank you. So sorry. So from the research and advocacy perspective, we advocate that the return from the pandemic should not be schooling designed for students who are behind. We do not believe that now is the time for drill and kill remedial intervention activities that are isolated and skills-based, but rather recommend that schools plan for project-based or inquiry-based lessons and units that are fun, joyful, and engaging, but also are academic and promote language development, critical thinking, and problem solving. I think it is very important to stay grounded in and committed to using the research-based and guiding principles of the English Learner Roadmap policy and use it as an anchor and a North Star. And so what we learned is that we need to build on the assets that English learners bring to the school, their language, their culture, their families, and we need to address the specific types of English learners. They are not a one-size-fits-all. They all have different needs if they are newcomers or long-term English learners or refugees. And so specifically, We have advocated for expanded learning opportunities targeted at English learners, ELD, English Language Development Professional Learning for all teachers, coupled, of course, with the implementation of daily integrated and designated ELD. And of course, we advocate that funding or support designed to address unfinished learning must be targeted specifically to the needs who need it, to the students who need it most, and that would include English learners.
Thank you, Martha. This powerful, powerful statement, especially that it's focused on the kids' assets. Junhee, could you please respond next?
Yes, so yes to all that Martha had shared. Spot on. And I want to step a little bit back towards the racial disparities of the pandemic and really emphasize the impact this had on DLLs and our families. So the pandemic has put to the forefront and laid bare the issues around systemic racism and the long-term effect of failing to address systemic inequities. And in California specifically, Black and Latinx workers have the highest rate of employment in essential jobs, and Asian, Black, and Latinx workers are disproportionately likely to work in jobs that involve close physical proximity as frontline workers. So given this context and given these conditions, the pandemic places Californians of color at greater risk and leads to disproportional impact. And I know that we see it within our schools and within our families as well. Our COVID-19 racial disparity analysis shows that Latinx, Black, American Indian, and Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Californians are disproportionately impacted. And there's some links that I can share that if you want to look further into this. And of course, this has implications for our dual language learner children. And we define dual language learner children as children birth to 5 that are in homes that another language than English is spoken. They're learning English in addition to their home language or simultaneously developing both languages. So DLL children grow up in a lot of families who have essential workers and who see their families going into work every day into the front lines and being exposed to COVID. And so we want to make sure that we remember that the stress and anxiety that they experience, and also as they see family members pass away, that this trauma is also a part of how we think about pandemic recovery beyond the academics, that we look at social-emotional supports and mental health of the students, as well as the educators that are working with the students. So wanted to provide that wider context as well of just what we're working within, and some more data around more families speaking another language than English reported food insecurity concerns. And specifically with distance learning, we know that DLL children and families experience a digital divide with struggling to access internet, learning technologies, and lack of overall linguistically supportive supports across the board. And speaking briefly to the early childhood space, I know we're meeting with districts today, but wanted to provide a glimpse of what it's looked like in the early learning space. There are major concerns around the sustainability of the field overall, as centers and the home-based providers have had to close their homes, have had to close their centers. And some that have managed to stay afloat are struggling financially. As the number of children have decreased, there is greater need for financial resources to sanitize and disinfect. And there are just overall concerns of how to make this work. And I'll talk a bit more later on about this impact as well. So around this, our organization has been featuring and interviewing women of color who have been leading the work as frontline childcare providers. And so we'll share a link there about how you can support and see what are the policy implications we can collectively advocate on. So all to say, so what did we learn from this? I think what stands out to me is the importance of partnerships and holistic supports for children and families. People have been reaching out in times of crisis. Districts have stepped up, provided food and meals during this time. So how can we build on these stronger partnerships moving forward that we experience now? And especially for culturally and linguistically diverse families, how can we increase access and information for opportunities and engagement moving forward? And the whole child focus, holistic supports, has come to the forefront in all conversations now. And we want to make sure that we are focusing on that and ensuring that social emotional supports, mental health supports, especially for our children of color and DLLs, are a part of that conversation. So wanted to add those different components there.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive response. Thank you. And now, Anya, would you please respond?
Yes, building very much from my colleagues. Throughout the pandemic, we have learned that when the stakes are high and they continue to get higher and higher, when the broader societal context gets more extreme on so many levels, the gaps widen and the inequities grow. There's growing awareness and acceptance of the intersectional social issues that we face, those that have just been described, as we're all much more aware, or at least discussing at deeper levels, those of us that are equity-minded educators and within school systems. The issues of race, of culture, of economic status, of immigration status, of mental and physical health and security, and language. So this awakening or this amplification of what many of us already knew calls us to stay rooted in our approaches and frameworks that honor these nested, interconnected issues of our society. Our approaches must be designed with this nestedness in mind, not addressing them as silos or in isolation, because they don't function that way. We have to prioritize socio-emotional health across the board for our children and families, as well as our educators and providers, and do so in culturally and linguistically affirming ways. We can't do the hard work of fighting injustice and redesigning school systems to serve all children in asset-based ways if we aren't attending to the emotional health and overall psychological safety of the communities we serve, of our staff, and of ourselves.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to Jan.
Thanks, Barbara, and just thanks to my colleagues for just those insights that they've shared. You know, I think building on what's been shared so far, I think through the vision and the lens from CABE, we really saw some of the challenges that our communities felt, our parents and families. So as we think about the connection to schools and teachers and some of the other issues that were brought forward, I think we really saw first and foremost that parents, although we always say and we know and we believe that parents are the first teachers and forever teachers of our children, our parents probably were not prepared to be the primary teachers, educators of our children during this time. And so the challenges, of course, were that pivot, right? To pivoting to really thinking about how to support children in their learning at home. And especially for the parents and families of our English learners and students of diverse language and cultural backgrounds. Their experiences varied as far as their own experience with the educational system in this country. And so I think a few of the issues that we found that really rose to the top for us through our work at CABE with our partners was really maintaining that level of connection and community. You know, our schools are really a center point within our communities for our families. And so without the access of going every day or going every day safely or being able to communicate in person and all those different aspects that we know we've all lived through, there was a sense that there could be a disconnection with our parents and families. And kind of referencing one of my colleagues shared too, it just really relied on our educators really reaching out to connect with them and build those strong homeschool community connections. You know, technology initially and even throughout was really a huge challenge for our parents and families. We found out very soon that gap that Anya spoke of now really stretched into the idea of who actually had access to a laptop, an effective laptop, or 4 laptops at home if you had 4 children, or functioning, smart devices and those types of things. And then if you had the equipment, did you have access to the internet, to the network? And of course, much happened throughout the state to create that access. Our schools rose to providing Chromebooks and trying to find as many ways as we possibly could to get technology into children's hands and into families' hands, but then finding the way to connect. And we know that while some families had the advantage of having those internet connections at home, some were sitting in the parking lot of a McDonald's or driving over to another location where maybe there was a hotspot or other kind of free internet available. So it wasn't always as easily accessible. However, the resiliency of our students and parents to make that happen and to find ways to really maneuver and really navigate technology We found, well, we at first thought that there would be a real drop of connection with parents and families, that our numbers increased. We heard from many districts, and I'm sure in your districts as well, you might have found that your ELAC meetings, or maybe your PTA meetings, or your school site council meetings had higher number of attendees, because we were getting familiar with Zoom and Google Classroom and other ways of connecting virtually. But it did take really very intentional support and technical offerings, ways to help our parents understand the different kinds of technology, to help them feel comfortable with that. You know, with all the challenges that we faced, and I think it was at the very personal level, as well as the academic level, and even professional level, as our parents navigated work situations and all of that, that I think what we learned from this was just the essence of parent leadership and how our parents rose to the task. And it wasn't always easy. And there were times it was very challenging, and breakdowns in families and communities. We understand that. But yet we were able to come together in so many ways and really build our leadership together. And we saw parent leadership that districts had invested in really rise to the top. And we saw the value of that, and the continued value of really engaging and connecting with our parents and families, and building on their leadership to be true partners within the educational system. We saw empathy, and we saw that people cared for each other. They reached out to each other, whether it was teacher to parent, parent to teacher, parent to parent, families to families, families to administrators, whatever it be. The empathy and the support that came really has shown in our communities. I think there's been an essence of trust building, and that we know that we need to continue to build trust, to build connections of our different backgrounds and experiences, to continue that work. And that really the technology that we were just so quickly brought into to have to use meeting virtually and remotely really can become a part of our ongoing work. It doesn't have to be the only way we commute and meet, but it can definitely be a tool that we continue to use to enhance and to really build stronger parent-family connections and communities with our schools.
Thank you, all of you, for naming those challenges, for advocating for our children and our families, for naming the racial disparity and that it caused to our families, naming the learning, naming the intersectional understanding of how we can work together. And Jan, what you just said about the resiliency of our parents, but also the leadership. Those are byproducts of the pandemic. I think that we still, like you all named, we still have a long way to go and learn from all of this. And so thank you for all of that. That's just incredible. Our next question is, despite the challenges, what were the silver linings to the last year and a half of students virtually learning? And I would like Junhee to first respond, and then Anya, and then Jan. So the question is, despite these challenges, what were the silver linings to this last year and a half of students learning virtually?
Thanks, Barbara. The pandemic highlighted the importance of the care economy and the intersectionality that Anya described. I think there grew a widespread recognition that childcare is essential, and we can't return to any sense of normalcy when working families lack access to care. And there grew like a general appreciation for teachers, for providers who risk their own health and their own families as they continue to serve our youngest ones in their own homes. And so all of these shifts in people's understanding of childcare, early learning during COVID-19 also helped propel an influx of investments at both the federal level and the state level. So I want to highlight three silver linings of budget items that were in this current year's budget that are windows of opportunities to support our English learners and our dual language learner children. Firstly is universal TK. The budget includes a series of investments beginning in 2022 to incrementally establish UTK with full implementation by 2025 to 2026. This is an incredible opportunity to serve all 4-year-olds and ensure that California can serve many more 3-year-olds, given that only 24% of those eligible for California State Preschool are currently enrolled. Secondly is facilities. This year's budget includes around $250 million $150 million from the general fund and $100 million from federal funds to provide infrastructure grants for construction, development, renovation of facilities, particularly in childcare desert areas, so that as we expand UTK and provide other childcare, we can build and have the classrooms prepped for our kids. And third is community schools. I know the summit had a panel yesterday discussing this, but a $3 billion one-time Proposition 98 general funds to be available over 7 years to expand and strengthen the implementation of community schools for all schools and all schools in communities with high levels of poverty. So this is the language from the budget. And so this is another place when we talk about holistic supports, mental health, and socio-emotional supports that we could tap into to ensure that our children are able to access these opportunities. All to say, it has been an incredibly stressful year for all of us, especially disproportionately on children of color. And we want to make sure that we're uplifting these silver lining and opportunities and making sure that these are equitably implemented. Thank you.
Anya?
So thank you. Those silver linings are so important to think about. And in some cases, children were able to develop their home language more fully because they were home with their family throughout the pandemic. That's an asset. And especially for our youngest dual language learners, for whom the research is very clear that the development of their home language can and should be a critical component to their success in overall language development and learning, but including in their development of English. Additionally, as Jan has already spoken to, many educators and school systems deepened their connections and partnerships with families throughout the pandemic, developing new ways and skills and spaces to connect and partner. I want to share a story from one of our teachers, a SEAL 5th grade classroom that is instructed in English. So we work in classrooms that are both dual language and English instructed. This teacher had a student last year who was a newcomer. He had come to her school in March of 2020 as a 4th grader. He started the school the week before the world paused for the pandemic. And he did not join any online classes in the spring of 2020. But as the new school year began that fall, he did begin to join his virtual classrooms, though throughout the fall, he never turned on his video. He had only unmuted once to share his preferred name. Otherwise, he had only participated in the chat. In mid-December, he finally turned his video on. They were in their daily designated ELD lesson, and they were focusing on the language function of cause and effect. This was content-driven ELD, which is a hallmark of SEAL. And they were reprocessing their Going West drawn label from the Westward Expansion Unit in Social Studies. The drawn label is a strategy where the teacher is explaining a complex set of concepts and content through visuals and graphic representations. So literally drawing them out visually and then labeling them with the academic vocabulary. So it's mid-December and the teacher hasn't seen the student yet at all on the video. And he finally turns his camera on. And sitting there next to him is his aunt, his uncle, his grandmother, and his little cousin. So within the Going West unit, they focus on contributing factors, the causes, and the effects of migration and immigration, which was clearly relevant to his family. The family members begin sharing parts of their story, mostly in Spanish, and using the sentence frames she had introduced in the ELD lesson when speaking in English. They proceed to ask her questions and want to know information about websites and sources of information. And then they go on to explain that some of the differences in their own schooling in El Salvador, specifically related to her math lessons, which indicated they had been attending math classes too. This story elevates the importance of being truly asset-based, of being culturally and linguistically affirming. On the one hand, this teacher felt so vulnerable in that moment, realizing that she had literally been observed by the whole family. And yet her approach was so firmly rooted in a funds of knowledge, asset-based, culturally and linguistically affirming approach that even though she was teaching in English, that she felt so honored and understood how meaningful this virtual learning could be. And this was a newcomer with a traumatic immigration experience who had been separated from his mother at the border and was still separated, living with his family. What a powerful way to forge connections and partner with families, students, and communities. So that is most certainly a silver lining. But our charge right now is to figure out, how do we scale that kind of learning experience and apply it now as we're in pandemic recovery, no longer working virtually.
Wow, that's a powerful story. It just, so heartfelt, but also lessons for us. I mean, so many lessons for us as educators, administrators, board members, for us to even be aware of that. I mean, we should be, what does that mean? I mean, just take that and begin to multiply it, like you say, scale it up. It's like amazing. So my mind is working right now, but I'm going to pass it on to Jan so that she can also follow up.
Thanks, Barbara. Anya, I love that story. I think what it exemplifies for me is really the true, what COVID did as far as really creating that connection between home and school. And we often talk about like home visits or connecting to the home, and what a way that teacher found to connect, but that the parents and families knew that their connection to the school and community was so valuable, and for many different reasons. And it will, display itself in many ways with different families. But I just love that, how that camera all of a sudden became the home visit vehicle, didn't it? It wasn't that you just set up a time for a parent-teacher conference or maybe a teacher visit home, but that was daily. Parents and families and teachers were really working every day together. What kind of stood up for me, and I'm going to share a story as well, kind of to tie into yours, just that value of language. I appreciate too what you shared, that in many cases, students were able to really solidify their own home language. We know through our work around research and practice for English learners and working within biliteracy programs that students that come from a language background other than English do so much better in their academic support when they have access and they have pathways to learning in their own language, and hopefully in an instructional program like a dual language immersion or other type of program that will support them. But oftentimes they get taped, as they move into an English type of program in the schools, they lose that home language. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Parents really solidified that language for their children, and children were practicing their family language at home on a daily basis. And I think that strengthened as well. We have a really interesting story through CABE and one of our parent leaders. And again, the benefit of having invested in parent and family leadership. So parents were ready to rise and be part of the community that responded. This happened in the Central Coast area, in the Ventura County area, one of the cities in Ventura County. And it was one of our parent leaders that had gone through our Project to Inspire program through CABE. And that program really talks about building homeschool community connection, community learning theory, really basing it on the strengths we bring and then building on that. So we had one of our parent leaders who lived in kind of a smaller home area where there were homes right next to each other. And the pandemic hit, and she started hearing from the school community that some kids weren't attending, that they weren't having as easy access to get into their computers, or if they did, maybe they weren't going online, what have you. And she became aware that her neighbor was in that situation. And as she investigated a little bit, she found out that her neighbor continued working, but left home between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work, obviously before her children were up. And her kids probably were having a harder time getting up. Maybe the resources weren't as readily available for breakfast, and then just getting onto technology and staying. When this parent leader heard that, it wasn't like she went to the school to report it or to raise a concern. This is where her empathy, where her approach to social and emotional, and thinking about how can I help with the social, emotional, and academic learning of these children, of these neighbors in my community. And so what this parent leader did is she would wake up, get herself ready, get her kids ready for the day, make breakfast, do all those things, kind of get her kids getting ready to get lined up. Then she would go out every morning and knock on the door of her neighbors. And she would make sure the kids answered. She would make sure they had breakfast, whether she brought it or they were able to prepare it in their own home, and make sure that they were on their computers and helping them in a helpful way, and connecting with their teachers and checking in throughout the day to say, how's it going? And where are you at with that? And being there as a resource to that parent and family. And it just showed to us, it just exemplified this sense of community and being responsible, not just for her own children, and not saying, well, I'm part of the school leadership when I do these things with our ELAC and all that. It's like, it was really bringing it home to saying, how am I going to help my neighbor, and how am I going to help her children, and give a support to this woman who was working incredibly hard, getting up early in the morning, but then having the assurance that her children were actually connecting in, and they had somebody there that could help troubleshoot them as well. That story just warmed us. It was just an amazing story in the midst of COVID. And as we were just challenged with the health concerns with them, this neighborly woman found a way to go there safely and do have that kind of support. And I think that's what kind of stands out for me as I reflect on this story, the story that Anya shared, and the hundreds I know that we have amongst us, is how important those stories are and how important they are to lift up now as we've come back into in-person settings in most cases, not to forget those stories and to keep looking for them, to keep gathering them and sharing them, and continue to build that community connection between homeschool and community, and really exemplifying where our assets are within that regard. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Jan. It just shows the power of stories, and it shows how resilient our families are. And it just makes me wonder, we should be focusing on stories and learning from those stories and building on those stories of our families. That's truly funds of knowledge. I mean, that is the basis of it. So I just thank you all for sharing your insights and stories. It's food for thought and for where we want to go. Our next portion of the panel is I'm now going to ask Martha and Anya and Jan and Junhee separate questions. So I will start first with Martha, and I know that Californians Together released its new report last week, Renewing Our Promise, Research and Recommendations to Support California's Long-Term English Learners. It's a follow-up to a landmark report on long-term English learners, reparable harm, fulfilling the unkept promise of educational opportunity for California's long-term English learners, written by researcher Dr. Lori Olson in 2010. I remember that report. It was phenomenal. It was, I like to say ovular instead of seminal because it was written by a woman. So it was profound and really hit the target about our neglect of our long-term English learners. So here we are a decade later with some progress, but not where we need to be. And what can board members like myself, what can we do to fulfill our promise to California's English learners? And how do we do everything possible so that the pandemic is not a reason that we don't see accelerated progress? I mean, what can you share, please, your insights and remedies, of where we should go. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so, first, as Barbara said, over the last decade, since we identified long-term English learners, and those are students who, despite many years in our schools and despite being close to the age at which they should be able to graduate, are still not English proficient and suffering from academic gaps with lack to access to a full curriculum. So, as Barbara noted, our report found that much has happened to address their needs, but the response is simply not been enough. And so our hope is that this new report that spotlights that long-term English learners remain a major challenge for California might inspire a broader commitment to end the educational harm. And just a little bit of data, of the secondary English learners in California public schools, 46% our long-term English learners. And I do want to say it's important to identify ELTELs for policy and program reasons, but we must remember that the deficit is in the system. It is not a deficit in the students. And so we know that only 1 in 4 English learners graduate from high school having met A through G requirements. And it's important to note that 36% of long-term English learners are also identified as students with disabilities. So for purposes of the report, we surveyed 107 districts, large districts, small districts with large numbers and large percentages of English learners. And we found that strategies most often used include support for A through G completion, expanded learning time, mentors on site, primary language assistance, and professional learning for teachers. Promising practices also include adult mentors off-site, work-based learning, specialized long-term English learner classes, peer mentors, partnerships with adult schools, and targeted materials. And of the districts that were surveyed, frequently cited supports that districts want to keep and expand include a focus on EL roadmap implementation, funding that can be targeted specifically to long-term English learners, LCAP engagement and planning process, and they also appreciate research and reports highlighting best practices. I do want to note that over 40% of the districts found significant or very significant obstacles in terms of fitting additional classes due to the master schedule. Also having the staff with expertise to serve these students, not having enough physical space for separate ELTEL classes, and of course the challenge of serving ELTEL students who also qualify for special education services. There were 5 focus areas and recommendations that the report offered. And so these 5 focus areas include 1, educator preparation and professional learning. And so of course, professional learning focused on ELTELs and providing language across the curriculum. Also noted is time for collaboration, time between classroom and special education teachers, from content area teachers to ELD teachers to plan and to understand the needs of long-term English learners. The second of the 5 areas is resources and planning, and this includes having an English learner master plan or a similar plan that includes placement and programs for long-term English learners. Of course, prioritizing the needs of the most vulnerable students, including ELTELs, when planning and making decisions about resources. And then something that's very important is monitoring and supporting reclassified fluent English proficient student achievement in grades 6 through 12 to ensure that achievement remains on par with that of English-only peers, because we found from looking at the data that our FEPs are beginning to slide a little bit as they go into the secondary schools. In terms of curriculum and instruction, it's important to provide ELTELs specialized ELD instruction and full access to the curriculum, which of course means access to all of the A through G, but also electives and those courses that really help students have this sense of belonging to the school. But something that is really, really important, we do need to serve and address the needs of our current long-term English learners, but we also need to expand programs that are research supported, perhaps using the EL roadmap as a guide to improve EL achievement in the elementary grades, because we really need to focus on the prevention of the creation of long-term English learners. And so we need to begin in preschool, in TK, in kindergarten, and throughout the elementary grades, providing a robust research-supported program. And I just really want to make a point about that. You know, this is not just about serving the kids that are already long-term English learners, but also thinking about the entire system. And then the fourth key area of focus is data assessment and accountability. And here I just want to uplift that, of course, we need to disaggregate data by ELTELs and students at risk of becoming long-term English learners, and use that information to inform planning. And then, of course, the last area of focus is engagement, relationships, and student focus. And here speaks to the social emotional piece and really authentically engaging long-term English learners and students at risk of becoming long-term English learners. And we need to always think about the communication with families in ongoing, varied, and meaningful ways, because they need to be part of their child's education. And so I just want to kind of summarize by saying that our system must finally ensure that our English learners are provided full, meaningful access to the curriculum, so no more gaps accrue. They need to receive high quality, comprehensive ELD, integrated and designated ELD, building the language that students need to participate, to engage, and to master academics. And we must ensure that our English learners are attending schools that embrace their languages and cultures and promote and support biliteracy. And so we hope that that our report helps to renew our commitment to these students and to redouble our efforts to ensure their achievement. And I think we all agree that hopefully 10 years from now, there will be a new report that will be able to look back and say, wow, the era, I get emotional, the era of long-term English learners is over. So thank you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you very much. That's so powerful. I think we need to incorporate that into our literacy by literacy campaign, definitely, because we know what to do. The challenge is always, how do we scale it? And how do we share the knowledge to our teachers and our administrators? So that's always the challenge, but let's all do it. So thank you. The next question is for Anya, and I hope you don't mind me saying your first names. I respect all your titles, but I'm saying our first names. Please. So last month, CEL recently released a set of briefs from a rigorous evaluation that objectively studied the replication of the CEL model. And so we'd like for you to tell us how CEL improved teaching practices and positively impacted outcomes for English language learners, how CEL can help district leaders and educators address learning acceleration for our English learners and our dual language learners.
Thank you. And I'm happy to build from Martha's brilliant words and the sharing of this important new report. Some of you may know that that CEL came forth very much as a part of reparable harm and the understanding, the deep understanding and uncovering of long-term English learners and how prominent they were in our state. And Dr. Lori Olson, who founded CEL, designed the model to prevent long-term English learners. So it's very much a core part of what we are, who we are, how we operate. And to your point, Barbara, CEL is a way to scale this notion, right? How do we bring forth robust programs, practices initiatives that will prevent long-term English learners. And so the good news that I get to bring you today is about our evaluation of the SEAL model, and that it proved that we can replicate the model. So the SEAL model is a comprehensive approach to research-based teaching and learning that centralizes the needs and assets of our youngest English learners, dual language learners, while supporting all student learning. So our evaluation of replicating SEAL across 12 different school districts in 67 schools showed us that it's possible. This evaluation was conducted by LMU, Loyola Marymount University Center for Equity for English Learners in partnership with the Wexford Institute. And so it was an externally conducted evaluation. And it showed us that we can bring forth comprehensive, robust, equity-minded, deeply research and values-based school improvement efforts across many different contexts, regions, and systems. And it's not an easy fix. This work is not easy. It's not a flash in the pan. It is the hard work of doing equity-minded school improvement efforts. So in this very long pandemic crisis, now that we embrace pandemic recovery, we know that it's critical to both be clear-eyed and very honest about the opportunity gaps and the inequities, but we also need to be rooted in this research base and what we know, our values and our commitment to asset-based approaches that are culturally and linguistically affirming, and that again, honor those funds of knowledge of our students and families. We know that children do need differentiated approaches and targeted interventions, and school needs to be engaging and safe and supported and joyful now more than ever. So to do so, teachers need time, just as Martha indicated and others have before, they need the time to plan and collaborate together. They need the professional learning. And yet, as I know many of you all know, it's harder now than ever. So as school leaders, as board members committed to equity, we have to find the ways to make this happen. And we have to do so in cohesive, coherent ways. We cannot pile on initiatives, tools, apps, interventions, or quick fixes. We need research-based, comprehensive, asset-driven, culturally and linguistically affirming approaches that can and will be sustained for the long haul. We also need to really think about what are the intersections and the ways to build on the growing opportunities that Junhee so fully defined. So there's this TK expansion, this universal TK and universal early learning that's on the table now more than ever. There's billions of dollars literally related to community schools. So we need to be thinking about our English language learners and the kinds of practices and the approaches to family partnership that we've been discussing here with regards to those opportunities. They can't be separate. TK expansion can't be separate from what we're talking about here because these are our families and communities. Community schools can't be something different than linguistically and culturally appropriate learning. So we really need to be thinking about how in the state of California are we prioritizing our dual language learner, English learner communities as we move forward in this new policy and society context that has opportunity, but also has, of course, this incredible challenge, and the stakes are quite high for us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you're right, you know, we can't pile anything on. We have to take things away and focus because our teachers are tired. Our administrators are tired. They're stressed. I mean, I see it every day as a board member. And I just think we have to figure out ways to release that and begin to just, you know, uplift them and just begin to focus and prioritize. Thank you so much for that. Jan, you're next. This question is for you. Districts have grown in their support for dual language immersion programs pre-COVID, and we have seen that it is even more important to maintain high quality biliteracy instructional programs as we move through COVID during remote and now in-person learning, particularly for ELs. What are some of the key components of maintaining high-quality dual language immersion programs? And what role do you see board members playing in supporting them?
Thanks so much, Barbara, for that question and for bringing that focus. As I listened to both Martha and Anya and Junhee earlier too, just was really resonating with me the role that we are all touching on about regarding research, policy, and practice. And it really is the intersection of these three key pieces that I think really, as they move forward with the vision that we have for English learners through the EL roadmap, through the vision of student academic success, of building on language and culture and all those different aspects, bringing research together with policy, and whether it's at the state level or at your local levels, and then looking and really strategically being mindful of what that looks like as it's being implemented daily in the classrooms, I think is so important. And so one thing that I want to kind of bring to the forefront with you all is something that was pre-COVID, right? I think back to 2016 when we had our elections and we passed Proposition 58 in the state. And we've presented at CLSBA and CSBA and other venues on the impact of Proposition 58, which really provided this amazing foundation, an open door to really looking at the value of language instruction in our schools. And that overwhelmingly the population of California said yes to that we wanted to have biliteracy, bilingual, multilingual, multicultural educational programs in our schools. And so as we now have, been moving through the COVID pandemic, we have heard some stories of saying, well, God, schools are so challenged and stretched and feeling some emotions that were described earlier that they might be pulling back, that they might be thinking we can't continue with that we can't find the teachers right now, or we don't know how to implement that when we're dealing with so many other things. And I think my message to you as board members and just fellow colleagues and all of us working together in this community of really supporting our students is to keep and maintain that vision. When we voted for Prop 58, and as we have all worked together to support the needs of our students of diverse language and cultural backgrounds, we know how important the instruction of language is in their daily lives. And as you dig deeper into the EL roadmap and you look at the assets-based learning and looking at instructional strategies and then systems within a district and across a district to help support English learners, it's so important that we are really going back to the research to see what is most effective and finding and maintaining that vision to keep that strong. We know through our research that dual language immersion is one of our most promising models. It's highlighted in SEAL along with other models as well, other programs. But we know through the work that CABE has done that when we look at that preventing long-term English learners, as we look at the success of students, as we look at bringing in our students from pre-K and TK, if we can give them access to their own home language while they're learning English in a structured, effective program such as dual language immersion, those kids will soar. They will academically really just go off the charts for us as they move through elementary, middle, and high school years, if they're in a program that's well-structured, well-defined, and well-supported. And so I think for me, as I think of your important role as board members at the local level and the role that you have in local policy, I would invite you to come back and take a look at Prop 58. In just a little bit up, maybe someone could put our CABE website in the chat. It's just gocabe.org, and you can find information on Prop 58 and some of those other key components, some of the policy that could help you as board members. And then to remind us that Prop 58 really gave us some really clear guidelines, and as governance bodies, as school boards, and working with your districts, we have a responsibility to stay with those to maintain that. Prop 58 shared that if at a school level, 20 parents in a grade level or 30 parents at a school level are asking for a language or an instructional program in another language than English, if they're asking for a dual language immersion program or a developmental language program, or there are a couple other programs that we could recommend as well, a district needs to respond to that. And we need to say that, yes, we're hearing your requests. Hopefully it's a mutual response and digging deep together. But parents can come to you as school board members or district officials or site leaders and say, we want our district to explore this. So if you have 20 parents at a grade level or 30 at a school level that ask for the district to explore and potentially implement a biliteracy program, the district is obligated to move forward with that request based on the law from Prop 58. And you actually have 60 days to actually give a response. Now, I know that might seem like a lot as we're dealing with COVID, but if we lose our vision because of our circumstances, we're just gonna end up in a spot that I know that we don't want to go backwards to, but that we want to really keep moving forward with. And so we always try to keep the numbers of 20, 30, 60 in our mind. 20 at a grade level, 30 at a school site. And then if you have that request, you have 60 days to formally respond. And you know, there are so many groups you can reach out to, all of us here, other partner groups that can really show the benefits and success of having effective structured instructional programs in other languages and how they will support your students from TK or pre-K all the way on up to high school, working towards the seal of biliteracy and really having that vision for preparing our students for a global economy. And I think the other thing that I want to share within this short amount of time is that as board members, you are in such an advantageous spot just to have that vision, to share that vision and to find out what's going on in your communities, to learn what languages you have there, to celebrate the languages, to bring that out even more now. And then as the additional funding is coming to us through both state and federal different funding channels, to really be thinking strategically, to really be thinking thoughtfully and mindfully, and really to be thinking in a bold way of how you're going to channel the funds that you're receiving to support the vision that you have within your school and within your district, and to help develop that vision so that it doesn't get lost amongst kind of the difficulties of COVID, but that vision for really addressing the needs of linguistically and culturally diverse students stays strong. The vision of the EL roadmap stays strong, and that you think about those funding resources and strategically think how to really have them make an impact within your district. We are here to support you in that. We know it's intense work, but it's the right work and the good work for us to move forward to really support our English learners and all of our students of diverse backgrounds.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Those are very concrete steps, and those are just beginning steps. But as Jan said, CABE is there to help districts, but also our partners that we see here today as well. So our last question will be for Junhee, and then after that we'll go to any audience questions that we have, maybe one or two, and then panelists, you'll have closing 30-second remarks, last sentence, so be thinking about that. So here we go. Junhee, in an earlier question around silver linings of the pandemic, you shared several key windows of opportunities and state federal investments that can support young dual language learners, children, and students. What can districts and board members do to ensure our youngest learners, and especially our DLL children, are supported to thrive and set up on a strong foundation for success through the K-12 journey?
Thank you, Barbara. I think there's a lot to build on that Martha, Anya, and Jan all shared, just from the LTEL work to the SEAL model of how we've been able to scale different approaches to find outcomes, and Jan's focus on Prop 58 and not losing sight of that. And throughout, I think the English Learner Roadmap policy, which provides that holistic framework of how are we supporting our English learners and dual language learners. So today I wanted to share briefly about some research of why I keep talking about the youngest learners and why it's so important, and then provide 3 specific recommendations for board members and districts. So I'll jump into the research. We know from research that the 0 to 5 years are a magical period of development with millions of neural connections being made every second. And that this strong foundation built on relationships and with their learning environments is critical to their growth and development throughout the early learning space, but also into the K-12 system. And brain science is showing that developing the home language is critical to cognitive development, also their sense of identity, and also aids in building a strong linguistic foundation for English language acquisition as well. Moreover, the brain is wired to learn multiple language. They are not confused by learning multiple languages starting from the earliest years. And all of this supports academic achievement. And so all of this research has come out, and I'm happy to share the National Academy studies and all this other brain research. Now we know and have the research that grounds how we can support our little ones. And going on from that, this is powerful data. We also have the SEAL evaluation data that spells out what we see throughout districts. And this is not an isolated study, that we see what programs work. And beyond academics, we know the powerful impact that maintaining your home language has on a child's relationship with their families, their extended grandparents, also their confidence on how they view themselves, their identity, their sense of self, their language and culture. And I think we all strongly believe that that's fundamental to a part of education. It's not just about academics, but how you see yourself and how you feel belonging. So in this district context, for the 0 to 5 magical years of development, early childhood is not starting from kindergarten. The preschool and TK is an integral part of the continuum of learning. And so we strongly urge that board members and districts also pay attention to the earlier years so that children can be supported from however early possible so that they are set up on a trajectory for success. So with this context, 3 recommendations. First, lead with equity in all major initiatives and be intentional about elevating dual language learners. So whether when planning for community outreach and implementation of UTK, community schools, the P3 alignment work, are we targeting students in highest need communities to be able to receive these new programs and services? When we start exploring about bringing in effective models like SEAL and dual language immersion programs, are we ensuring that the access is first and foremost for the DLLs in our highest need areas of our districts? And do we intentionally include DLLs in our strategic plan, in our LCAP planning? Are they included and called out? So that's one. Secondly, partnerships between districts and early learning programs in the community will be critical, especially in light of UTK and also President Biden's Build Back Better proposal, which is currently being discussed. And if it goes through, that could mean $9.5 billion for California childcare and preschool. But with all of this happening, the transition of implementing UTK and other initiatives will have huge impacts for our little ones and the rest of the early learning field as well. So it's important to build those partnerships with early learning programs in the community so that children have access to developmentally appropriate early learning experiences. Early learning providers and partners in the community have great expertise in providing age-appropriate holistic supports for children with strong family partnerships. So how can we find innovative ways to work with early learning providers in the community and the mixed delivery system to ensure that all children can have a strong foundation? And I want to quickly highlight the incredible work that is taking place across 16 counties in California with the first 5 California dual language learner pilot. There have been investments made and counties, and I can share the names of counties later, but there could be in your district could be in that county that is doing incredible work to invest in professional development, learning, family engagement, partnership work, specifically with a DLL focus. So how can we build on what's already happening and make those connections? Third and lastly, providing strong support for transitions and collaborative PD opportunities between early learning and early elementary. Especially looking at all these different initiatives, how can districts make sure that there is paid collaborative professional learning time? Also that also includes the early educators in preschool and TK. We know that kindergarten and early elementary have been getting this paid time, but we want to ensure that our early educators are also included in that process. So I'll end with that. There are incredible windows of opportunity as we recover from the pandemic, and I hope and urge board members that we elevate the importance of these early years.
Thank you so much, Junhee. I have closing remarks, and I just want to thank you all for your passion, for your dedication, for your advocacy, for your expertise, for your leadership, and in sharing and addressing the challenges that we face, the silver linings, the research findings, the instructional practices, ways of supporting our families and our young children all the way from birth through 12. You're just amazing. I could listen to all of you. I'm going to go read everything that you guys have shared. Going to advocate it to our board members and especially our administrators as well. So in closing, I I asked you to think, right, about the last question would be in 30 seconds, each of you. What would the panel like to see board members acting on, advocating for English learners and dual language learners? What would you like to see board members acting on and advocating for English learners and dual language learners? I'll start with Jan because Jan has to leave, but go right ahead. Jan?
Thanks so much, Barbara. I think what I'd like to ask board members to act on, kind of tie into my comments, is to really strategically think of your funding and look for funding to increase your biliteracy instructional programs, frame it around the English Learner Roadmap, look at the resources we provided, and strategically think about how to build language instructional programs in your districts.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll see you all later. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Anya?
So aligned with that, I would ask board members to advocate for culturally and linguistically affirming approaches, particularly investing in and building strong dual language programs beginning in preschool and TK, and making sure all teachers and leaders, also those who instruct in English and maybe monolingual, have the professional learning and support to do the very, very complicated work of this time, perhaps the hardest work of their lifetime, to serve their diverse students and families in asset-based ways.
Thank you so much. Martha?
I just want to say, I want to echo, of course, but I think implementing the EL roadmap is something that is, it's aspirational and it's comprehensive. And I think that would be a good start. And I need to uplift just the need to really make sure that integrated and designated ELD are implemented, in a very engaging way where students are learning about the world and it's connected to content. And so I think that would go a long way to preventing the creation of long-term English learners. And thank you. I have to go.
Okay, thank you so much. Junhee, you have the last word.
Yes, all of that. And I think I want to leave with making sure that our DLL children and families are seen as strengths and assets. And I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but really bringing that and uplifting that to the rest of the board members and ensuring that the EL roadmap policy can be implemented, and not to forget the early childhood years, which are essential and foundational.
Yes, thank you. I want to close now and thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your dedication and, of course, all your work and your expertise. We thank you so much on behalf of CLSBA and the board of directors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, so much for engaging with us and staying with us for our second day of our Unity Summit, and appreciate all of the kind comments in the comments section as well. So please, we hope that you enjoyed the entire program, but in the spirit of continuous improvement, please, if you can, submit to us your feedback. We use that to adjust in real time and for the next day. To make improvements for our program. So please, if you can, there is also a raffle for a $25 Amazon gift card and an annual CLSBA membership. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you for tomorrow. And a special announcement is we will have a new MC for tomorrow. And we hope that you enjoy the program for tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Cuando baila, sí, señor, el bugalú arrebata. ¿Cómo no? Micaela cuando baila, sí, señor, el bugalú arrebata. ¿Cómo no? Toda la gente la llama, sí, señor, la reina del bugalú. Ay, 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 Micaela se botó. Que se botó, que se botó, que se botó. Ay, 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 Micaela se botó. Y cuando yo bailo con ella, atrás me dejo. Ay, 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 Micaela se botó. Cuando yo baile con ella, sí, señor, Micaela se botó. ¿Cómo no? Cuando yo baile con ella, cuando baila bugalú. Lo dice toda la gente y lo dice Marilu. Está sabrosa Micaela igual que mi bugalú.